At a glittering Billionaire's Gala, young lawyer Amara Johnson endures humiliation when Charlotte Whitmore, the arrogant heiress, publicly slaps her in a storm of racism and entitlement, until the unexpected arrival of Richard Whitmore, Charlotte's powerful father, turns the night upside down. What follows is a suspenseful unraveling of silence, complicity, betrayal, and truth. As Richard forces the elite crowd to confront their cowardice, Amara finds the courage to speak against injustice, and Charlotte watches her empire crumble in front of everyone, leading to a breathtaking climax of poetic justice where silence shatters, power shifts, and the untouchable heiress loses everything in the most humiliating way possible. The chandeliers of the Whitmore Foundation Gala shimmered like captured stars, their light spilling across gowns stitched with more diamonds than most people would ever see in a lifetime. It was a night where power dressed itself in silk and arrogance wore perfume. Amara Johnson stepped carefully into the ballroom, the click of her heels almost drowned by the orchestra. She straightened her navy evening gown, modest compared to the glittering golds and reds that filled the hall. She knew eyes were on her, not admiration, not exactly curiosity, something colder. "Who invited her?" whispered a woman near the entrance. "Civil rights lawyer, I heard. Some award or other," replied her companion, a man with a glass of champagne balanced like a scepter. Amara pretended not to hear. At the bar, a cluster of executives sipped expensive scotch. One of them, a man in his 50s with a polished smile, approached her. "Miss Johnson, isn't it?" "Yes," she said, voice steady. "We've read about your activism." He let the last word hang as if it were dangerous. "Quite brave of you to come tonight. Not your usual crowd, I'd imagine." Amara tilted her chin. "Justice isn't restricted by social circles." A faint chuckle. "Indeed." Behind him, two women exchanged glances, their eyes traveling down her gown. One murmured, not quietly enough, "Brave to come in that." Amara moved through the room, each interaction a performance of polite disdain. Compliments wrapped in barbed wire. Smiles sharp enough to cut. Still she endured. She knew why she was here, to prove presence mattered, to make visible what they would rather ignore. At the edge of the ballroom, near a table draped in white silk, she caught her first glimpse of Charlotte Whitmore. The heiress laughed too loudly, her champagne glass waving like a wand. Her gown glistened silver, slit high up her thigh. Around her, sycophants gathered, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. She noticed Amara almost instantly. Charlotte's lips curved. "Well, isn't this interesting?" She glided across the room, her entourage trailing behind like petals. "You're Amara Johnson, aren't you?" Charlotte's voice was honey with shards of glass. "Yes," Amara replied. "I've heard so much about you." Her eyes flicked to Amara's dress again, though I expected something different, more glamorous. "You know, gala appropriate?" "It's appropriate," Amara said softly. Charlotte smirked. "If you say so." Her friends laughed on cue. Charlotte tilted her head, feigning innocence. "So tell me, how does it feel to be surrounded by people you usually protest against?" Murmurs rippled. Guests leaned closer, pretending not to eavesdrop. Amara inhaled slowly. "It feels like an opportunity to remind people that justice isn't selective." Charlotte's brows arched. Big words for such a small stage. She leaned closer, whispering loud enough for the circle to hear. "Don't get too comfortable. This isn't really your world." The orchestra swelled. The evening glittered, but the air thickened, foreshadowing the collision yet to come. The champagne table gleamed under golden light, a sea of crystal flutes lined in perfect rows. Amara stood nearby, her hand steady as she reached for a glass. She needed the coolness of the drink, something to ground her against the thick atmosphere pressing in. But Charlotte Whitmore wasn't done. The heiress glided over, her heels clicking like a metronome of arrogance. Her entourage followed, their laughter trailing like perfume. "Well," Charlotte began, voice sharp enough to slice through the orchestra's waltz. "Still here? I thought perhaps you'd slipped out the back by now." Amara lifted the flute to her lips, keeping her composure. "I have no reason to leave." "Oh, darling," Charlotte crooned, "you have every reason." The circle tightened. People angled themselves closer, not to help, but to watch. Curiosity had always been cruel's twin sister. Charlotte reached for a glass of champagne and held it up. "Two outsiders who think they belong." She sipped, eyes never leaving Amara's face. One of her friends giggled. Another whispered, "Savage." Amara set her glass down. "I'm not here for games." Charlotte tilted her head. "Games, no, sweetheart. Just truths. You don't belong here. This is a family legacy event. Billionaires, world leaders, people who built empires. And then," she gestured at Amara's gown, "you." A sharp laugh erupted from her circle. Amara's jaw tightened, but her voice remained even. "I was invited for my work. My achievements. That's more than enough." Charlotte's smirk widened. "Achievements?" She stepped closer, her perfume cloying. "Defending criminals? Stirring up protests? That's what they call achievements now?" A man nearby cleared his throat as if to interrupt, but when Charlotte's eyes flicked toward him, he looked away. The silence spoke louder than words. Amara straightened. "I fight for justice. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's not my problem." Charlotte's laughter was sharp, brittle. "Justice? How noble." She turned slightly, addressing the crowd as though delivering a toast. "But let's not pretend this isn't what it is. Someone trying to climb into a world that doesn't want her." A ripple of murmurs spread. The orchestra played on, indifferent. Amara's voice, calm yet firm, cut through. "Respect doesn't depend on your last name, Miss Whitmore. It depends on your actions." Charlotte's smile broke. For the first time, a crack appeared in her perfect mask. Her hand moved before anyone could predict it. A sharp crack split the air. The glass in Amara's hand trembled. Her cheek burned, a hot, stinging reminder that the moment was real. She had been slapped, open-palmed, deliberate, brutal. Gasps echoed through the hall. A woman dropped her fork, the clatter loud against porcelain. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Yet nobody stepped forward. The circle froze. Statues in designer gowns and tailored suits. Eyes wide, lips parted, but feet nailed to marble floors. Charlotte's chest rose and fell with satisfaction. "There. That's where you belong." For a moment, Amara said nothing. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. The sting wasn't just skin deep. It burrowed into memory, into history, into every humiliation endured by voices silenced. She looked around, searching for even one ally. But every gaze skittered away. Champagne flutes lifted to trembling lips. Murmurs slithered through the air. The orchestra continued its elegant lie of normalcy. Charlotte basked in it. "You see?" she said softly, though the room carried her words. "They all agree. Nobody here will stand with you." "You don't belong," Amara finally spoke. Her voice shook but did not break. "You hit me because you have nothing else. No truth, no strength. Only entitlement." Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "Careful, careful." Amara stepped closer, her cheek still aflame. "The only one who should be careful is you. Because power built on cruelty doesn't last." The words hung in the air, dangerous and alive. Charlotte's entourage shifted uncomfortably, their smirks faltering. But still, no one intervened. The gala had become a theater. Violence on stage, silence in the seats. Charlotte flicked her hair back. "We'll see how long you last here." Amara did not move. She would not retreat. Not tonight. The orchestra swelled again, a hollow echo against the tension that suffocated the room. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "Her father won't like this." But Charlotte only smiled, believing herself untouchable. And Amara, cheek burning, stood in the center of it all, a woman who refused to be erased. The sting on Amara's cheek had faded to a dull throb, but the silence in the room was unbearable. It wasn't the silence of peace, it was complicity, the kind that wrapped itself in tuxedos and diamond necklaces. She stood there, breathing evenly, refusing to drop her gaze. Around her, conversations restarted in fragments, whispers stitched together like a coward's chorus. She provoked her. "Unnecessary scene. Better to let it go." The orchestra played on, as if the violence hadn't happened at all. Charlotte Whitmore swirled her champagne with a triumphant smirk. "Well, that settles it. Maybe now you'll learn your place." No one laughed, not now, but no one contradicted her either. Amara's voice cut through the air, calm but heavy. "Not one of you is going to say anything?" Eyes darted away. A senator adjusted his cufflinks. A socialite bent down to fuss with her heels. A banker studied his wine as though it held scripture. "Unbelievable," Amara whispered. A woman near the buffet finally murmured, "It's better not to get involved." Amara turned sharply toward her. Better for who? The woman flushed, pretending to sip her drink. Charlotte chuckled low. See, nobody cares. You're making this bigger than it is. A little slap, that's all. Don't be so dramatic. Amara clenched her jaw. Violence is never small. Humiliation is never small. Charlotte stepped closer, eyes glinting. Then leave. If you don't like it, there's the door. Amara scanned the room. Every polished face turned away. People who had preached charity, progress, equality in interviews and speeches. Here they stood, mute. Her voice trembled with suppressed fire. You all build hospitals, fund scholarships, donate to causes. But when faced with injustice right in front of you, you hide. What good is your philanthropy if it dies the moment it might cost you something? Her words cracked against the marble walls. A few guests shifted uneasily, but the silence held. Charlotte smirked, her voice dripping mockery. Preach all you want. They won't choose you over me. A man in a navy suit finally cleared his throat. Miss Johnson, perhaps it's best not to escalate. Amara turned, her eyes sharp. Escalate? She assaulted me. And your concern is appearances? The man faltered, muttering something about the dignity of the evening. Charlotte's grin widened. Exactly. Don't ruin the gala, darling. Be grateful we even let you in. Amara inhaled, steadying herself. I was invited. I earned my place. Unlike you, I don't rely on someone else's name. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. For a moment, even Charlotte's smile wavered. You'll regret that, Charlotte hissed, her mask of composure thinning. Maybe, Amara replied, but at least I'll still have my integrity. The silence pressed heavier. It wasn't passive anymore, it was judgmental. The guests were unsettled not by Charlotte's slap but by Amara's refusal to bow. She could feel it, their anger at her courage. To them, silence was easier. Resistance was disruptive, but she would not give them the comfort of her retreat. She lifted her chin. I'm not leaving. Charlotte's laughter rang out again, hollow this time. Stay then. Let everyone see how ridiculous you look. Her entourage chuckled weakly, but their eyes betrayed discomfort. The balance had shifted. A whisper rose from the far corner. Her father is on his way. The words slithered across the room. A chill followed. Charlotte's smirk stiffened, but she masked it quickly. Good, she said, raising her chin. He'll be proud. Amara stood still, her voice low but resolute. We'll see about that. The orchestra's music swelled, but the gala no longer glittered. It had become a stage waiting for its final act. The silence of the elite hung in the air, dense, suffocating, damning. And Amara, alone but unbroken, refused to let it crush her. The ballroom pulsed with music, but beneath it the silence was heavier than stone. Amara could feel her pulse racing, her cheek still burning where Charlotte's hand had landed. Around her, the crowd pretended civility, sipping champagne, whispering in corners, avoiding her eyes. Charlotte basked in the false calm, her smirk painted on like war paint. See, it's over. You made a scene. No one cares. Now fade into the background where you belong. Amara's fingers curled into fists. She could swallow the humiliation. She could walk away, but something inside her refused. Not tonight. Not in front of this gallery of cowards. She took one step forward and her voice, firm, trembling with restrained fire, cut through the waltz. Enough. Heads turned. Glasses stilled midair. Amara's voice grew stronger. You call yourselves leaders, philanthropists, builders of the future. But when injustice walks right into the center of this ballroom, you do nothing. You hide, you smother it under silence. A few gasps. A man near the stage muttered, How dare she? Amara raised her chin. Do you know what silence does? It tells people like her, she gestured toward Charlotte, that they are untouchable. It tells every person who has ever been humiliated that they are alone. And you call that dignity? The crowd stirred. Uneasy shifting of heels and tuxedos. Charlotte let out a brittle laugh. Oh, please, spare us the lecture. You're twisting this into some big tragedy. It was just a slap. Amara's eyes burned. To you, it's just a slap. To me, it's a reminder of every door slammed, every voice silenced, every hand that tried to put me back in my place. You think your power makes you right, but all it makes you is arrogant. Charlotte stepped closer, her smile turning into a sneer. You're playing the victim. It's pathetic. No, Amara replied, steady. I'm exposing the truth. The tension thickened. Guests leaned in, unwilling to intervene but unable to look away. Charlotte's tone sharpened. Truth? You don't know the meaning of the word. You think anyone here cares about your speeches? They don't. They're here for me, for my family, for my father. You're nothing but tonight's entertainment. Her friends snickered weakly, but the laughter died quickly when Amara didn't flinch. Entertainment? Amara said softly. No, I'm the mirror you don't want to face. And tonight every single person here has to see themselves in it. The orchestra faltered, the violinist missing a note. The energy in the room shifted. A man whispered, "She's going too far." Another hissed, "She'll ruin herself." Charlotte seized on it. Hear that? Even they agree. You're embarrassing yourself. But Amara stood straighter. If speaking the truth embarrasses me, then so be it. At least I won't be remembered for cruelty. Her words cut. Charlotte's face reddened, her mask slipping. You think you can shame me? Charlotte spat. This is my world. My rules, Amara's reply was razor-sharp. And yet your rules couldn't stop me from standing here. The crowd erupted in murmurs. The room was no longer safe for Charlotte's arrogance, no longer complicit in her smirk. Charlotte's hands trembled around her glass. She slammed it down on the table, the stem shattering against marble. The sound cracked through the hall like lightning. You'll regret this, she hissed, pointing a trembling finger at Amara. When my father arrives, you'll see. He won't let you get away with humiliating me. Amara didn't blink. Maybe your father should ask himself why you felt the need to humiliate me in the first place. A collective gasp. Charlotte's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, her power faltered. Amara's voice carried over the stunned silence. I came here with respect. I was invited. I stood quietly while you mocked me. But respect is not servitude. I won't shrink for your comfort. Not tonight. Not ever. The room seemed to hold its breath. Even the orchestra stopped, bows hovering over strings. Then, from the grand staircase at the far end of the ballroom, heavy footsteps echoed. A hush fell, sharper than before. Every head turned. Richard Whitmore had arrived. The billionaire's frame filled the archway, tall, commanding, his eyes scanning the room like a hawk circling prey. The whispers died instantly. Charlotte's relief was palpable. She straightened, smoothing her gown, her smirk returning as though salvation had entered the room. Amara, however, did not move. Her heartbeat thundered, but her stance remained steady, because now the night was no longer just about humiliation. It was about truth, and truth had finally summoned its judge. The grand staircase gleamed under the chandeliers as Richard Whitmore descended, each step echoing through the marble hall. His presence shifted the air itself. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Even the orchestra stopped, bows suspended like statues. Charlotte lit up, her entire body straightening as though she had been waiting for this moment. "Daddy," she breathed, relief flooding her face. Richard did not answer. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in the broken champagne glass on the floor, the stunned expressions and the charged silence clinging to every guest. His gaze finally landed on Amara, calm, unflinching, her cheek faintly red. The tension doubled. Richard's voice was calm, measured, but it carried like thunder. What happened here? No one moved. A cough came from somewhere near the buffet, quickly smothered. Charlotte stepped forward eagerly. It was nothing, Father. Just a silly misunderstanding. This woman, she spat the word, was out of line and I... Stop, the command cracked through the hall. Charlotte froze, her mouth still open. Richard's eyes narrowed on her. I did not ask for excuses. I asked what happened. The guests exchanged nervous glances. No one wanted to speak. The silence stretched, suffocating until Amara's voice cut through it. She slapped me. The words dropped like stones into still water. Ripples of murmurs spread across the room. Richard's head turned slowly toward his daughter. His gaze was not soft, not protective. It was cold steel. Is that true? Charlotte faltered. She provoked me, Father. She insulted me, embarrassed me in front of everyone. Answer the question, Richard snapped. Charlotte swallowed. Yes, the crowd held its breath. No one dared shift. Richard's face remained unreadable. He turned his gaze on Amara, studying her with unsettling precision. And you? Amara met his eyes steady. I spoke the truth. I refused to be humiliated. That's all, a long silence. Then Richard's voice dropped lower, heavier. And this room full of people did nothing? His question wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but the weight of it crushed the room. Guests looked at the floor, at their drinks, anywhere but at him. Charlotte tried to regain ground. She stepped closer, her tone pleading. "Father, you don't understand. She doesn't belong here. She came to mock us, to—" "Enough," Richard barked. The sharpness made even the orchestra flinch. He took a step forward, the crowd instinctively parting. He stood between Charlotte and Amara, his tall frame casting both in shadow. To his daughter, he said, "You humiliated yourself." Gasps rippled. Charlotte's face drained of color. Richard turned to the guests, his voice carrying like a verdict. "And you allowed it. You stood here, watching, whispering, pretending civility while cowardice rotted beneath your jewels." The silence was now unbearable. The glittering hall, the gold, the wealth, it all seemed tarnished in his words. Charlotte stammered, "But father—" Richard's hand lifted sharply. "Not another word." She bit her lip, trembling. He turned back to Amara. "And you stood your ground." His eyes narrowed slightly as if weighing her. Not many would. Amara's throat tightened, but she held her voice steady. Respect shouldn't be a privilege. It should be the bare minimum. A murmur swept through the crowd, half admiration, half shock at her audacity. Richard didn't smile, but his gaze lingered on her, unreadable. Then he addressed the room again. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of legacy. Instead, it revealed corruption, weakness, hypocrisy. His voice hardened. "And I will not tolerate weakness," Charlotte gasped softly. "Daddy, please," Richard's glare silenced her. His tone dropped, sharper, colder. "You've mistaken privilege for power. You've mistaken cruelty for strength. And tonight everyone saw it." The crowd shifted, restless. The once glittering gala now felt like a tribunal. Richard's words sliced through the air. "Your actions have consequences, Charlotte. Even you are not untouchable." Charlotte's hands trembled. She looked around desperately, but no one met her gaze. The same guests who laughed at her jokes now avoided her like poison. Richard's presence dominated the hall, but his judgment hadn't fallen yet. The air was thick with anticipation, dread, and a twisted kind of relief. And Amara stood rooted in the center, realizing this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the system that had been exposed. The evening had turned into a trial, and Richard Whitmore was judge, jury, and executioner. The ballroom had transformed into a courtroom without walls. The chandeliers above blazed like spotlights, unforgiving in their brightness. Every guest stood like a silent juror, trapped between fear and fascination. Richard Whitmore's gaze swept the crowd. His silence was heavier than thunder. Then he turned slowly to his daughter. "Charlotte." His voice was low, precise. "Explain yourself." Charlotte's throat bobbed. "I told you, Father, she provoked me. She insulted me, made me look foolish. Everyone saw it." Richard's jaw tightened. "You struck her. In my house. In front of my guests. Do you call that strength?" Charlotte faltered. I was defending our name." "No." Richard's reply was ice. "You were defending your ego." The crowd rippled. A man near the back whispered, "He's destroying her." His companion hushed him quickly. Richard's eyes turned to the guests. "Did anyone here speak against it? When my daughter raised her hand when she mocked this woman, did anyone among you intervene?" The silence that followed was suffocating. He let it hang, unbroken. Then he sneered. "Of course not. You all traded your spines for champagne." A few faces flushed. A senator looked down at his shoes. A philanthropist fiddled with her bracelet. None dared speak. Charlotte seized the moment, her desperation flaring. "You see, Father? They're all silent because they agree with me. She doesn't belong here." Amara's voice cut across her like a blade. "They're silent because they fear you." Every head snapped toward her. The audacity of it was a spark in the oxygen-starved room. Richard's gaze shifted to her, sharp and curious. "Fear me?" Amara stood tall. "They fear losing favor. They fear losing invitations, investments, opportunities. That's why they say nothing. Not because they agree. Because their comfort matters more than their conscience." The crowd stirred, restless under the truth they'd avoided. A man muttered, "She's not wrong." Richard's lips curved into something like satisfaction. "At least one of you has the courage to speak plainly." Charlotte's face twisted. "You're taking her side?" Richard's eyes cut to her. I am taking the side of truth. Something you clearly cannot face. Charlotte's voice rose shrill. She humiliated me. No, Richard's voice thundered now. You humiliated yourself. The words cracked through the hall. Charlotte flinched as if struck. Amara's breath caught, but she didn't look away. Richard turned to the crowd once more. Tell me, how many of you whispered while she was mocked? How many of you watched her be slapped and decided your silence was safer? No answer. Just the shifting of gowns and tuxedos. The guilt was thick, a stench that filled the marble chamber. Richard's tone dripped disdain. You pride yourselves on charity galas, on donations, on being the faces of progress. But when justice knocked on your door tonight, you hid. You betrayed your own facades. A woman finally spoke, her voice trembling. We didn't know what to do. Richard snapped back, you did nothing. That is worse. The woman shrank, eyes lowered. Amara spoke then, her voice steady. Silence is a choice. One that protects the powerful and punishes the vulnerable. Tonight proved that. The guests avoided her gaze, but the truth hung in the air like smoke after fire. Inescapable. Charlotte's desperation spiraled. She stepped closer to her father, her words cracking. Father, please. You can't let her stand here and shame me. I'm your daughter. Your heir. Richard's stare was merciless. An heir who cannot control her temper. Who mistakes cruelty for authority. Who drags our name into filth with her arrogance. Charlotte's eyes shimmered with panic. You don't mean that. Oh, I mean every word, Richard said coldly. And so does everyone here, though they lack the courage to say it aloud. Amara spoke once more, quiet but unyielding. This isn't about me anymore. It's about what kind of power you allow to define this family, this legacy. Richard's gaze lingered on her. For a moment the room held nothing but that charged silence between them. Then he turned back to Charlotte. You thought yourself untouchable, he said, voice sharp as glass. But tonight you will learn that even you are accountable. Charlotte's lips parted, but no sound came. Her mask of entitlement shattered, leaving only fear. The gala had become a reckoning. The elites shifted uneasily, watching the once proud heiress unravel. And in the center of it all, Amara stood unwavering, her truth no longer silenced, her dignity no longer erased. Richard's judgment had not yet fallen, but everyone knew. The fall was coming. Charlotte stood frozen, her silver gown shimmering under the lights, but all the glitter could not mask her unraveling. The heiress who once commanded the room now trembled under her father's gaze. Richard's voice was cold iron. Charlotte Whitmore, you've mistaken cruelty for power. That ends tonight. Charlotte's lips parted. Father, no, you can't do this to me. I'm your daughter. You are my daughter, Richard said, each word deliberate. But tonight you are also my shame. Gasps rippled through the hall. Charlotte reached for him, but Richard stepped back. Don't. Her hand hovered in the air, trembling before she withdrew it, panic spilling across her face. Richard turned to the crowd. All of you have witnessed this disgrace. Let it be known. Charlotte Whitmore will no longer inherit a single share of my empire. The words slammed into the room like a gavel. A woman near the stage whispered. He disowned her. Charlotte's knees buckled. No, Daddy. You can't, I can, Richard cut her off. And I will. He continued, voice carrying like a verdict. Effective immediately, she is stripped of all privileges tied to this family. The Whitmore fortune, the Whitmore name. She will not use them as weapons against the powerless ever again. The crowd erupted in murmurs, disbelief and awe swirling together. The untouchable heiress had been touched, shattered, dethroned before their eyes. Charlotte's tears spilled, streaking down her flawless makeup. You're destroying me. No, Richard said coldly. You destroyed yourself. He turned then, his gaze landing on Amara. For a moment the air stilled, heavy with anticipation. You, Richard said, his tone shifting. You refused silence. You stood alone when the entire room betrayed its conscience. Amara's chest rose and fell quickly, but her eyes never left his. I only told the truth. Richard nodded once. And that took more strength than any of them could muster. The guests looked down, ashamed, exposed. Charlotte wailed, her voice shrill. You're humiliating me in front of everyone. Richard's stare cut her down. Good. Let this humiliation teach you what entitlement blinded you from. Humility. The crowd whispered like a rising tide. She lost everything. He really did it. She's finished. No one rushed to comfort her. The same entourage that once clung to her every word now inched back, distancing themselves as though she carried a disease. Amara finally spoke, her tone even. "This isn't about me winning or her losing. It's about what's right." Richard inclined his head, his expression unreadable, "And tonight right has been done." Charlotte sobbed, her voice cracking. "You'll regret this, Father. You'll regret turning against your own blood." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Better to turn against blood than to let it poison the family name." The words landed harder than the slap Charlotte had dealt earlier. She collapsed into a chair, broken, her silver gown pooling like spilled mercury. Richard addressed the room once more. "Let this be a warning. Wealth does not absolve cruelty. Status does not excuse cowardice. And silence will no longer shield the guilty." The chandeliers gleamed above, their light suddenly harsh, unflattering. Amara stood still, her cheek still faintly swollen but her presence unshaken. Charlotte sat in ruins, stripped of the throne she thought eternal, and the elite, silent witnesses to it all finally realized power had shifted before their eyes. The gala was no longer a celebration. It had become a reckoning, and justice, poetic, merciless, undeniable, had claimed its due. The ballroom had emptied into uneasy fragments. The orchestra had long since set down their instruments, the final notes of the waltz swallowed by scandal. Waiters lingered at the edges, unsure whether to clear the untouched desserts or let them stand as relics of a ruined evening. Amara stepped away from the center, her pulse still thrumming, her cheek tender to the touch. She didn't look at Charlotte again. There was nothing left to see, only a hollow figure collapsed in silk, her sobs muffled against the marble. Guests trickled toward the exits, whispering in clusters. "Did you hear what he said? She's finished. He stripped her of everything." "About time." The whispers were sharp, quick, eager to rewrite allegiance. Not one of them had defended Amara hours ago. Now they spoke as if they had always sided with her. Outside the tall glass doors, the New York night glittered with city lights. But inside, the chandeliers burned cold. Richard Whitmore stood near the staircase, issuing clipped instructions to his staff. His composure was intact, his authority unchallenged, but there was a heaviness in his expression, as though even victory came at a cost. He turned once, his eyes finding Amara. A nod, brief but deliberate, passed between them. Not forgiveness, not pity, recognition. And then he was gone, swallowed by his entourage, already moving toward the next crisis. Amara exhaled, her body finally trembling after holding so much steel. She set her empty champagne glass on a table and walked toward the doors. Every step echoed. Every pair of eyes followed. A woman stopped her, one of the socialites who had whispered earlier. "Miss Johnson, that was remarkable. You spoke so bravely. You inspired us all." Amara's gaze was cool, inspired. "You said nothing when it mattered." The woman flushed crimson. I didn't know what to say." "You knew," Amara said quietly. "You just chose silence." The woman looked away, shamed, and Amara walked past her without another glance. The night air outside wrapped around her like a balm. Cool, fresh, free of chandeliers and whispers. She lifted her face to the city sky. The skyscrapers loomed, indifferent but alive, their windows glowing like watchful eyes. Her cheek still burned faintly, but it was no longer the mark of humiliation. It was proof of endurance. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, messages flooding in, journalists, colleagues, strangers who had already heard whispers of the gala. The story of the slap had escaped those walls faster than champagne spilled across marble, and the story was not hers to carry in shame. It was Charlotte's downfall. Somewhere behind her the double doors slammed. Charlotte stumbled out, mascara-streaked, heels clutched in her hand, her silver gown dragging across the pavement. The once revered heiress looked smaller than the city's shadows. Their eyes met for a brief electric second. Charlotte's voice cracked. "Are you happy now? You ruined me." Amara's reply was calm. "No, you ruined yourself." Charlotte's lip trembled. She wanted to scream, to strike again, but the weight of her father's judgment pressed down too heavily. She turned away, disappearing into the night like a ghost stripped of her crown. Amara inhaled deeply and walked to the curb. Her driver opened the car door, but she lingered. watching the glittering skyline. She thought of every courtroom she had stood in, every protest she had marched, every voice she had defended when others looked away. Tonight had been different, more brutal, more public, but the pattern was the same. Injustice performed in plain sight, silence protecting it, and courage breaking it. Her cheek throbbed again, but this time she almost smiled. Pain was fleeting. Truth endured. By dawn, headlines would blaze across screens. Heiress disowned after public racist outburst at Gala. Charlotte Whitmore loses inheritance in scandal. Civil rights lawyer stands tall against abuse of power. The world would feast on the spectacle, but Amara knew the real story wasn't in Charlotte's fall. It was in the silence that had allowed the slap to happen, and the silence she had shattered. Hours later, as the city awoke, Amara sat at her desk, the skyline glowing behind her. She opened her laptop, her fingers steady on the keys, not to tell her story, but to prepare for the work ahead, the cases, the marches, the voices still waiting to be heard. Because tonight wasn't just a scandal, it was a reminder. Justice wasn't handed down from chandeliers or marble staircases. It was wrestled from silence, spoken into rooms that didn't want to hear it, carried by those who refused to bow, and Amara Johnson had refused. The Whitmore Gala would be remembered, not for its diamonds, not for its waltz, but for the night silence shattered, and an untouchable heiress learned she could bleed. Poetic justice had been written in the language of humiliation and truth, and its echo would linger long after the chandeliers dimmed.